Locked On NFL Scouting, you're getting the other half of the Draft Dudes bold bets in the AFC Conference for the 2025 season, courtesy of yours truly.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. I'm your co-host, Kyle Krabs, typically joined by Joe Marino, but flying solo here today on the show as we present the other half of our bold bets for the AFC Conference. Today is Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Rookies across the league reporting to training camp across many sites throughout the course of the day today. So it's an exciting time. And I want to thank all of our everydayers who do tune in because it is your team's every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Joe, getting a little sun today. I hope he's using his sunscreen so we don't come back and we got training camp next week, right? And we'll be off and running across the NFL. So we want to get these bold bets in. Joe and I do this every year where we divide. We come up with 32 bold bets, one for each team. We present them to all of you individually. And then we come together and we decide which ones we're going to take each other up on. We split these right down the middle last year. Of all the bold bets we took each other up on, it was right down the middle. We had a 500 record when it was all said and done. So this has become a very competitive exercise. And I hope I bring the juice. I know Joe kind of gassed up over the weekend. I don't know what his bold bets for the AFC ultimately were, but he really gassed up, dialing up the intensity with how hot the takes got this year. So the objective is to be spicy. The objective is to kind of go off the beaten path of what you would expect and kind of paint the picture. Sometimes these bold bets can tell a story, and that's what I'm going to try to do with some of mine here in the AFC Conference. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in with the AFC South, looking at these teams and some bold bets that I think are going to take place across this division. We'll start with the Houston Texans, and the bold bet that I have for Houston this year is amidst the offensive line overhaul and obviously the coordinator change with Houston, and they've revamped the wide receivers. I think CJ Stroud has a higher sack rate taken than he did last year. And that was 8.9% of dropbacks ended in sacks. Some of this is just how CJ plays the game, right? Because he likes to process things. He likes to work progressions. He likes to move his eyes. He likes to hunt for the big plays. And you have that with some new pass catchers. You have that with the DNA of a very different looking offensive line. And I think especially early, that might lead to having to eat the ball a little bit more. But some of this is just some of these guys, Russell Wilson in his prime, Deshaun Watson in his prime, guys that have the big play mentality that can move, but they're not prolific athletes. Sometimes they just take more sacks. And I think CJ Stroud, amidst those other variables with new targets and a new offensive line and new offensive coordinator, his style of play, I think it all adds up to higher than an 8.9% sack rate in 2025 for CJ Stroud. The Indianapolis Colts, next team that I have here, and this is in part going to tell you a story of who I think is going to win the starting quarterback job in Indianapolis. I think Anthony Richardson has more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns in 2025. And here's the silver lining of, I think Daniel Jones is ultimately going to win the job. I think the floor and the stability is at a certain point with Daniel versus Anthony. It's very erratic. And then there's the durability element of it too. But Anthony can still make significant contributions, red zone, short yardage, his own package. And sometimes you start with that. And then once you master that, you can build into a more robust menu of what you're asked to do. And for Richardson, I think even if he doesn't win the starting job, I think he will have a clear role on this team to provide. So I think Richardson, more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns, in part because I think he's going to have his own package, even if he doesn't win the starting quarterback job, which I don't think he's going to do. The Jacksonville Jaguars, with Liam Cohen coming in. My bold / hot take for Jacksonville is that Trevor Lawrence is going to go for 4,200 yards, 25 plus passing touchdowns, and a 100 quarterback rating. Now, these numbers, they might not seem crazy ambitious for Trevor Lawrence, but when you consider, from year 1 to year 2, there was the big jump with Doug Peterson versus Urban Meyer. That year 2 is when Trevor set career highs in yards, passing touchdowns, and passer rating. And it was 41-13. So he's never hit 42 in a season before, 4,200 passing yards. He had 25 touchdowns, which is 4 more than his next highest season. And then his passer rating that year was 95.2. So he's never had higher than 95.2. He's never had higher than 4,113. And he's had 25 plus passing touchdowns once. I think Cohen gets a career year out of Trevor Lawrence, in part because of some of their investments in the offensive line and Cohen and how we know that his scheme works, and having Brian Thomas Jr. I think they're going to lean on the run game with the heavier personnel. They've invested in some tight ends to bring in there to kind of bolster what they can do from a personnel diversity standpoint. I think it all adds up for Trevor to be a very likable product, especially when you consider the leap that he made as a rookie in 21 under Urban Meyer to in 2022, the first year that Doug Peterson was there. So that's my hot take for Jacksonville. Trevor Lawrence gets all of the 3, 4,225 and a 100-plus quarterback rating. And then I have the Titans. And I like this one for Tennessee, not because I think Cam Ward's going to be bad or ineffective or anything like that, but it kind of goes back to the way Cam Ward plays the position and how it's similar in some ways to CJ Stroud, with the big play mentality and liking to hold the ball and liking to work outside of structure and utilizing the full field that you have at your disposal. I think Cam Ward is going to be the 3rd consecutive number 1 overall pick that will lead the league in sack yardage lost in 2025. Think about it. Last year it was Caleb Williams, and Caleb Williams was sacked 70 billion times. Some of it was the offensive line. Some of it was the scheme. Some of it was Caleb and the style of play in which he brought. Caleb was sacked 68 times with 466 lost yards. Both of those led the NFL. Now, Bryce Young did not lead the league in sacks taken as a rookie, but he was really darn close. He finished his rookie season with 62 sacks taken and 477 sack yards lost. He actually lost 11 more yards than Caleb Williams did, despite Caleb being sacked, 6 more times. So Bryce lost more yards per sack. And I think Cam, with the outside of structure stuff and trying to make things happen and having to learn how to walk the tightrope, and that's not to say I don't think Cam Ward's not going to have a good season, but I think that element of Cam and mastering protections at the NFL level with the Callahan offense, and if your first read's not there, how do you react, and how do you react to early arriving pressure, and how good are you at setting protections early on? I think all of those things will lead to a player that has to learn how to walk the tightrope. And I think he will, but I think it will come with some growing pains as a rookie in 2025. So those are my AFC South takes. We're going to go to the AFC North next here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Make sure you guys stick with us. Look, we've all been there. You log on early, you wait for concert tickets, you're on the web browser seemingly for forever for the ticket sales to start, and then you lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with all of the stress of buying tickets online, and that's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you could save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. So if you're tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Game Time's zone deals can pick the best seats in your section for you. Plus, they have all-in pricing and they offer panoramic seat views, so you know what you're signing yourself up for before you hit purchase and put the tickets into your cart. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets for the lowest prices, guaranteed. Moving on to the AFC North. I don't know how hot. I guess this one is hot. And it has to do with the Ravens as a team. We're going to start with Baltimore. I think they win the AFC this year. Now, I can hear some groans and moans of, oh, they're one of the betting odds favorites to win the Super Bowl on FanDuel and to win the AFC Conference. That's not hot at all. But I think if you were to ask, and I go back to the ESPN poll that just came out from Jeremy Fowler yesterday, where they're polling coaches, scouts, and executives across the league. Lamar Jackson ranked as the fourth quarterback in the NFL, behind Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, and Josh Allen. And Lamar Jackson does not have a favorable career record against Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. I believe his career record, when you include the playoffs, is in 11 games. I think he's 3-8. And he had one of those wins last year early in the season with the big 35-10 win over Buffalo, but then they lose in the divisional round to Buffalo, and they lost the season opener in Kansas City. And the unfortunate thing for both of those games is you had game-tying scores that was dropped in the final 2 minutes by Mark Andrews with the 2-point conversion to tie the game. And then also Isaiah Likely's foot just barely struck out of bounds on a game-tying touchdown at the end of regulation in the season opener against Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. So I think the perception of Lamar, particularly as a playoff passer and what he can do, would say, hey, the Ravens are in the divisional round. Are they going to win this week? I think the overall concept will be, well, is Buffalo and Kansas City still alive? If the answer is yes, then no, they're not going to win it. I think for Baltimore, I am buying the Ravens AFC Conference title outlook in 2025. I think this whole team is going to be a wagon. Lamar shown growth with how he plays those two teams in particular. I think he had his two best statistical efficiency performances the last two times he played Buffalo. And it's a far cry from what he was as a first, second-year starter when he had to play that Buffalo team. And those defenses had him seeing ghosts like Sam Darnold. The Cincinnati Bengals. I think Joe Burrow becomes the first 5,000-yard passer since Patrick Mahomes in 2022. We had two in 2021, including Justin Herbert, who just went over with like 5,014. I think Burrow, who had over 4,900 last year and did just about everything you could have possibly dreamed to help drag Cincinnati into the playoffs, I think he gets at least 100 more passing yards, and I think he goes over 5,000, which has not been done for several seasons now. We have not seen a 5,000-yard passer despite the 17 games since 2022. The Pittsburgh Steelers. This one's spicy. But I look at this schedule for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they obviously have favorable matchups early where they get the Jets in week 1, and then they're in New England with Seattle having to come to the West Coast, and then they catch Minnesota international game, and then they get their bye, and then they go Cleveland, short week at Cincinnati, but then they have extended rest going into Green Bay at home. And they have the Colts. Got to go to the Chargers. And they get the Bengals at home. Their last game before Thanksgiving is at Chicago. And I think they have a good chance to start very hot, the Steelers do. Especially you get McCarthy in the first month of his starting career with Minnesota with that defense and what I think you can do. Seattle's got to come to you. You get the Jets and Patriots as your two road games before the bye week. I think you could start 4-0 and then 5-0 coming out of the bye. At Cincinnati on a short week's a tough draw, but then you get extra rest for Green Bay. Say you lose one of those three games, Minnesota, Cincinnati, and Green Bay. I think you at home take care of the Colts. I think you got a decent chance to go on the road and beat the Chargers, but even if you don't, okay, let's I think you got maybe 2 or 3 losses at most. And then you got home against Cincinnati. I'd pick the Steelers to win. And then at Chicago, I'd pick the Steelers to win. Pretty robust early looking schedule through the first 11 games. But then Thanksgiving happens. And they have Buffalo, at Baltimore, home against Miami, at Detroit, at Cleveland, home against Baltimore. So you get both games against Baltimore. You get Buffalo, you get Detroit. Now you get Cleveland and Miami in there. My bold take for Pittsburgh is I think this football team wins one game after Thanksgiving, which would be a frustrating late season turn for a team that has Aaron Rodgers, has Jalen Ramsey, has DK Metcalf. There's a lot of buzz. They very much change their modus operandus, right? How they go about their business. And for it to start really hot, which I think it will, but then I think fade with Buffalo, twice against Baltimore, at Detroit. And you get Miami at home and then Cleveland on the road. I think they win one game. And I think as a result of that, many people would be surprised, and that makes it a bold bet. The Browns. I think Dylan Gabriel's the only quarterback for Cleveland this year that finishes the year with a positive touchdown to interception ratio. Joe Flacco is probably going to get the first look, right? I don't know if Kenny Pickett's going to make the roster. How long is Joe Flacco the quarterback, especially if the Browns play the way that we think they're probably going to, with an aging offensive line and missing JOK on defense, and kind of questions around the rest of the defensive front, and seeping back in the secondary. Right? I have some questions with Cleveland. As a result, I do think this team's going to struggle a little bit. I think they'd be foolish to struggle and have two young rookie quarterbacks on the roster and not play them at some point. I think Dylan Gabriel's the only one who finishes with a positive touchdown to interception ratio when the season is all said and done. So that's the AFC North. We're going to go to the AFC West, sneak a couple in before the second break. Kansas City Chiefs, they're 51-9 against the West since 2015. They've won this division 9 straight years. 51-9. I think they go 3-3 this year in the division. Chargers obviously on the up. Broncos on the up. Raiders offensively are going to look different. Now they lost some of their dogs on defense, and I think that's going to be a challenge for the Raiders. We'll get to the Raiders in just a minute. But I think Kansas City, with their own questions, they continue to transition with around Pat. They still have those key pieces in place. How good is Travis Kelce going to be? I think with the rising of the rest of the West, Kansas City this year will lose 1/3 of the amount of games that they've lost since 2015 in the division in 2024. Now, I still probably pick the Chiefs to win this division, but we'll get to that down the road as well. The Chargers, buying all of my Ladd McConkey stonks here. Ladd McConkey becomes the 4th member of the Chargers franchise to go over 1,300 receiving yards in a single season. Lance Allworth did it 3 times. Keenan Allen did it once, and John Jefferson did it once. So McConkey, who finished with just over 1,100 yards last year, I think the chemistry is vibing. I know they added some more skill players to be support players, but I think McConkey's still going to be the bread and butter guy. And as a result of that, I think McConkey's going to go for big-time production. So give me 1,300 plus for what would be the 6th time in franchise history, and it will make him the 4th name to achieve that feat in his 2nd season. We got time for one more in the West, and then we're going to finish the West and go to the AFC East to close here today on the show. Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix turns in a top 5 passing yardage mark in a single season in franchise history. That number is 4,089 yards. I think Bo goes over that. Bo, obviously, as last season went on, kind of really fell into some very efficient play at 3,775 yards. I know the critiques on Bo Nix, and I'm aware of what they are about the balls thrown behind the line of scrimmage and how productive those throws behind the line of scrimmage were, and how sustainable that is on a year-over-year basis. And I get it, but they invested in the supporting cast around him. They have really kind of rise the tide of the running game with what they put in the offensive backfield, and they get some young guys that are maturing. Jake Plummer currently holds 5th place with 4,089 yards. I think Bo Nix goes over that in a single season, which would also mean that Bo Nix would have more passing yards in a single season than John Elway ever did. Elway ranks 6th. It's Manning 3 times, Jay Cutler, Jake Plummer, top 5. And then John Elway's best season was 4,030. He only went over 4,000 yards once in his NFL career. So Bo Nix, I'm buying Bo Nix from a production standpoint with the improvements around him, and then another year in Sean Payton's system. We're going to go to the Raiders, finish the AFC East. That's next year, locked on NFL Scouting. Make sure you guys stick with us. For the Las Vegas Raiders, apologies to Raiders fans who kind of hung in there, hoping maybe you get a positive take, but I'm selling this defense where you have to play the Chiefs twice. You have to play the Chargers twice. You have to play the Broncos twice. And you individually have said goodbye to a number of talented players off of the roster. You said goodbye to Robert Spillane, right? You said goodbye to Divine Diablo. You said goodbye to Nate Hobbs. You said goodbye to Trayvon Mooring. You said goodbye to Jack Jones. Christian Wilkins still in a boot with the injury that cost him almost all of last season. He played less than 25% of the snaps. And me as a Dolphins fan that was hoping for a 3rd-round compensatory pick, I'm definitely not bitter about it. Guy played 1 billion snaps. Couldn't get 25%. But especially if Wilkins is not able to go, or if Wilkins is banged up and not 100%, you're looking at a Raiders team that has a ton of pressure on Max Crosby. And I look at the physical plug players that you have as the second-level players, and I don't think they're great space players. And I like Polamalu, and I like Jeremy Chin. But is the cornerback room ready to go? Is Malcolm Kuntz healthy? Is the second level able to really run at the high level? I have questions up and down. And the Raiders in 2024 allowed 434 points. That ranks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9th worst in franchise history. The 3rd worst of their time in Las Vegas. They were worse in 2020 under Gruden when they gave up 478, still finished 8-8. And then they were worse from a points allowed perspective when they went 10-7 with a minus 65-point differential in 2021. That was the Gruden / Rich Bisaccia year. So I think the Raiders are looking at a bottom 10 all-time franchise history points allowed. Again, they've done that 3 times since they moved to Las Vegas. I think it will happen again because I have big-time questions about the talent. I think this could be a Carolina Panthers last year type situation. And that's my worry for the Raiders, especially in this division where these other offenses with these other coaches look like they're really humming. In the AFC East, we'll start with the Bills. I think both Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid double their career best for touchdowns in a single season. Shakir, his record and mark is 4. For Dalton Kincaid, his record and mark in each of the last 2 seasons has been 2. So I think Shakir gets at least 8 receiving touchdowns, and I think Dalton Kincaid gets at least 4. So you're going to get 12 combined touchdowns for Shakir and Kincaid. Some of this is James Cook. What kind of production are you going to reliably get after such a disproportionately high amount of touchdowns last year? How do you spread that around? I think both of these guys with clearly defined roles, they're the top 2 target getters last year. I think they had disproportionately low touchdowns last year. So I think they both doubled touchdowns from last season. Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid. The Miami Dolphins. I think the Dolphins get 14 or more starts from every starter on the offensive line. And if you want to know how hot this take is, I would like to introduce you to the curse of Bullygate. Bullygate, if you're a younger NFL fan and you're not familiar, centers around Richie Incognito and Jonathan Martin and John Jerry back in the early 2010s. And the year before Bullygate happened, the Dolphins had 4 players on their offensive line that played at least 1,000 snaps. It was Jonathan Martin, Richie Incognito, Mike Pouncey, and John Jerry. All played at least 1,027 snaps in that season. Jake Long was the former number 1 overall pick, was the 5th member of that offensive line. He played 730 snaps. The 7th offensive lineman on the depth chart that year played single-digit snaps. It was a very stable line. And then Bullygate happened, where there was appalling language that was being used. Jonathan Martin quit because he couldn't handle the pressures of being an NFL player. And then they kind of crafted this story about how he was bullied. And the other parties involved were guilty of things that are not appropriate. And is a very messy situation with the Ted Wells investigation. There's a whole investigation around it. It happened mid-season, right? Kind of blew up the whole offensive line, blew up the vibe of the team. Anyway, so the year before Bullygate, the Dolphins had 4 1,000-yard snap takers on their offensive line. You can look at the year after, 2000, what was it, 13 was Bullygate? The year that Bullygate happened through the 2019 season, the Dolphins had the same amount of 1,000 snap taken seasons from offensive linemen in all of those years combined as they did the year before Bullygate happened. There's been one time since like 2012 that the Dolphins have had 4 offensive linemen take 1,000 snaps, and it was in 2021. And there was only one other time where 3 offensive linemen took 1,000 snaps. I'm going to say every offensive line starter for the Dolphins this year plays at least 14, starts at least 14 games. Teron Armstead out of the picture. Austin Jackson recovering from an injury. He missed half the year last year. You have James Daniels coming off of a season-ending injury last year, but had been a very durable player before that. You have a rookie in Jonas Savaitanaya, and Aaron Brewer at center played 100% of the snaps last year after breaking his hand in training camp. So, when you want bold bets, we're going to say the Dolphins actually get effectively a full season from their starting offensive line. We'll see what that looks like. The New York Jets, Justin Fields sets career best numbers in both passing and rushing touchdowns this season. Fields, through 4 seasons, his career mark for passing touchdowns is 17. He would need to average 1.01 per game to break his career best record. I think he will do that this year upcoming. And then from a rushing touchdowns perspective, in 2022, when he rushed for 1,143 yards, he rushed for 8 touchdowns. I think this is going to be a run-heavy offense. I think Fields is going to be a big piece of that puzzle. So give me over 8 rushing touchdowns for Fields and over 17 passing touchdowns for Justin Fields. I think he gets them both. The New England Patriots are last team. And I think Christian Gonzalez is going to formally announce himself as one of the best corners in football with the splash plays. I think that's the thing that's missing now. He was a second-team All-Pro last year. He finished 5th in Comeback Player of the Year. He only played 4 games as a rookie in 23. But the first-class ticket, you can ask Derek Stingley, especially with how he's perceived to have passed Sauce Gardner. You generate turnovers, your conversation is going to change. I think Christian Gonzalez gets 5 interceptions in 2025, which would be 2 more than he has in his first 20 games combined. So 5+ interceptions for Christian Gonzalez is my bold bet for the New England Patriots. I'm buying on him as a rapidly ascending player. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting. I hope you guys enjoyed looking through the AFC Conference for my bold bets, hot takes, whatever you want to call it. Looking forward to doing the NFC again on Thursday, but Joe's going to have you tomorrow with his NFC bold bets. And then we'll get together early next week before training camp opens across the league. and we'll take each other up on some of these bets. So that's what you have to look forward to in the days ahead. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Talk to you all again soon.